This course wasn't intended to be followed step by step, so try not to worry about keeping up with everything I do. Rather, sit back, relax, and absorb in the information as we walk through Blender's interface. Towards the end of this course, I will create a top hat for the frog sample file we showed at the beginning of the course. Feel free to follow along there. However, this course is intended to get you comfortable in Blender so you can dive into other courses. I have several courses that go through creating your own projects step by step. I recommend you check out those courses after this one if you're interested in following along. If you're having difficulty following along, check out the bottom right shortcuts here. This will display any key that I put in. Next up, I recommend that you have a 3-button mouse to follow along with. If you're serious about 3D, you're going to need a 3-button mouse, as the middle mouse button is used to navigate your viewport heavily. First up, we're going to take a look at the interface and primarily the navigation. So here we have our 3D viewport and our default scene. By default, that scene includes a camera, a cube, and a light. You can go ahead and delete that to start fresh if you like, but we'll just leave those there for now. Our 3D viewport is kind of like our 3D workspace. This is where we can move around and edit our objects. So let's take a look at how we move around in that space. First, we're going to look at how to use the mouse. So if you middle click on the mouse button, it will rotate around whatever you have framed in that scene. If you hold Shift middle, that will allow you to pan left and right in the scene. You can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out, or you can hold Control middle mouse button and move up and down to zoom in and out much quicker. Now, if you don't like that, or it's hard for you to use, you can also click this gizmo up here and click and drag, which will allow you to move around the viewport. You'll also notice that these highlight as you click them, and those will snap you into views. So if I click this, that will snap me into the front view. I can tell what view I'm in by looking at the information up here where it says front. If I click here, that'll take me into the top view. And if I click and drag, I can rotate back to where I was before. You can use the numpad to move through these different views as well. Alternatively, if you come up here under the View menu, you can click View, come down here to Viewpoint, and change from top, bottom, front, back, right, or left. You can also see the corresponding numpad shortcuts there. I recommend getting familiar with these because that's something you'll do quite often. Up here, if we come to Camera and Active Camera, that'll actually take us into the active camera in the scene so we can view from our camera's point of view. Now, if we click and move around, it won't move the camera. We need to actually move our camera to adjust the camera positioning. Now, before we move along, I'm going to ask you to change a couple things in your preferences that I believe make navigating much more beginner friendly. We're going to come up here to Edit, Preferences, and then we're going to click Key Map. Now, when we click Key Map, we'll have all these options here. We're going to change just a few. We're going to change Select All Toggles, and we're going to change Spacebar Action to Search instead of Play. And then we're going to turn on Tab for Pie Menu. All these will make sense in a second. Now, if you X out, it'll save those by default. Next up, let's say that we want to move something in our scene. Let's grab this cube and move it. Now, if I grab this cube by left selecting it, and then come up here, I'll have various gizmos on the tool panel. If you can't see this tool panel, press T, and that'll make it appear. So let's come up here and we have a Move tool, a Rotate tool, a Scale tool, and then a Transform tool. So let's go ahead and click the Move tool. We'll see here that an arrow corresponds with each direction. In Blender, red is X, green is Y, and blue is Z. If you can't remember, you'll see those over here. If we click any one of those, it'll lock into that. If we click the circle, we'll move from whatever angle at the viewport we're in. And you can see it can move around there. These squares in between will combine the two. So we can see here that it combines the X and the Y. If I click Rotate, we have the same thing. We can rotate on just the Y or just the X, or we can grab this and rotate from the viewport. Likewise, we have the option for the scale as well, where we can scale along one axis, or we can scale up the whole object. We're going to start over with a new cube. So we're going to delete this cube. You can grab this cube and press the Delete key, and that will disappear. If you want to add objects into your scene, you can come up here and go to Add, and then you'll see all the various options here. Some of these are advanced. For beginner, I recommend you stick in Mesh. And when you go in Mesh, you'll see various options here. We can add a cube, a UV sphere, a cylinder, cone, torus, or this default monkey, which comes with Blender. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add a UV sphere. Great, now we have a sphere instead. Let's look at how we can select multiple objects. By default, it's a click and drag. So if we go here and click and drag, you can see that we can select multiple objects. You'll notice one is highlighted a brighter orange than the others. That means that's the active object, and certain effects will only work with the object selected, or you can parent objects to one another. Let's look at what that looks like. Let's go ahead and add a cube. Now let's take this cube and move it up. And we're going to parent this cube to the sphere. So you can see right now this is light orange. If I shift click and select the sphere and then hit Control P, I can set that parent to this object. Most times you're going to use Object Keep Transform. So let's go ahead and click that. And now when I grab the sphere and move it around, you can see the box is following. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that cube. If you don't see that box when you click and drag, you can actually change that up here with the selection tool. You can see that you have lasso, circle, and box. I usually leave box on. Now if you remember, we turned on a select all. So if you want to select everything in the scene, just press A, and you'll see that it selects everything. Now if I press A again, it will deselect everything. You can also click away. If you click off to the side, it'll deselect everything. Selection is going to be a big thing when you're moving around objects and later in edit mode, so just get familiar with the different selection tools as they'll be very important. Next up, let's take a look at the different render modes. So up here, if we click wireframe, we can see the wires that our sphere is made up of. We'll dive into more about how a mesh is built a little bit later. Over here, we're in solid view, which will show us just one solid color for all of our objects. Here we're in material view, which will do a preview of materials, which we'll see later. And then here we have our render view. Now the render view can take longer to render and be more taxing on your computer. So I recommend, unless you're on a high-end computer, that you only stick to render mode just to preview for quick pieces. Let's take a look at how this works in render mode. In render mode, we can actually see the lighting information and all of the other effects that we have in our scene. So this is a great way to preview what your final render might look like when you go to finish your project. Let's switch back to solid view for now. Another way you can switch between these render modes up here is if you press the Z button. So by pressing Z, it'll bring up this menu, and then you can turn around and click which one you want. So if I click wireframe here, you'll see it snaps me back into wireframe mode. If you recalled, when I clicked wireframe mode, you were able to see all the wires of the object. And if you notice right now, we can grab our object and move it around, but we can't edit our object. That's because we're in object mode. Now this is very difficult for people first starting 3D to understand, but there's an object mode and there's an edit mode. Object mode allows you to move objects around, apply effects to objects, and set many other settings. However, if you want to sculpt or move or change the shape of an object aside from scaling and rotating, you're going to need to go into edit mode. The way I like to describe this to people who are starting out in 3D for the first time is if you're familiar with Adobe After Effects, Photoshop, or Flash, an object is kind of like a pre-comp, a smart object, a group, or a motion clip. An object can include multiple meshes, which you can then alter once you click inside of it to go into edit mode. That's the best way I can think to explain it to a beginner. But if you still don't understand, let's tap into edit mode and look at a mesh. So let's go into edit mode here, and we have two ways of doing this. The easiest way for beginners is to come up here and you can see all the various modes we have in Blender. We have the object mode, which I just explained in edit mode. We also have the sculpt mode, which allows us to use sculpt tools. And then we have vertex paint and weight paint, which is for rigging your characters and other options. And then texture paint here, where you can paint textures onto your object. For now, we're going to be focusing on object and edit mode to keep it simple. Let's go ahead and enter edit mode here. Immediately you notice our selection has changed, and that's because now we can adjust and select our mesh. So let's go ahead and zoom in here on our object. If you're struggling to zoom in on your object, you can actually frame that object pretty simply. Make sure you have the object selected, come up here to view, and then come down to frame selected. And now when we rotate, we will rotate around whatever is in the middle of our frame. Let's take a look at how a mesh is built. I'm going to deselect everything and select things one at a time. So we have different selection modes up here. These are called vertices, and a singular one is a vertex. If I switch over to this mode up here, these are called edges. Edges connect vertexes. And then if I come over here to face select, these are faces. So faces are what are drawn between connected vertices and edges. So I'm going to go ahead and delete one face here. So if I press X, I get this option to delete. And I can choose to delete vertices, edges, or faces. So I'm going to go ahead and delete a face here. Now we have a hole in our object because there's no face connecting these vertices and edges. If you're trying to fill a hole like this in an object, all you need to do is select the surrounding edges, and then once they're all selected, you just press F and it'll fill that hole with a face. Now that we're in mesh mode, we can grab either edges, faces, or vertices to adjust our object. So let's look at what that kind of looks like. If I come up here and I grab the move tool, which we can use the move, rotate, and scale tool, and I grab a face, I'm going to make sure I'm in face select mode up here. you can see that I can grab that face and move it around, and everything attached to it will move as well. If I go ahead and select a bunch of faces and move, you can see that it moves everything at once. Now, it may depend on what selection mode you want to be in depending on what type of edit you're trying to make to your mesh. Grabbing the face and moving it will move the entire face and all the connected edges and vertices. Likewise, grabbing just one edge will only move the connected vertices, and then you can also grab singular vertex and just move that as well. One alternative to using this mode up here is to use tab, which is what I had you change in the settings earlier in the video. So if you go ahead and have an object selected and you hold tab, you can then select one of these different modes by letting go. So I'm going to go over here to edit mode and let go, and you'll see that now we enter edit mode.